Hey everybody, this is Kevia Cloud. I'm here with Eddie San Marco again,
Hey,
and we're going to start off a series that we're really excited about. This is going to be sort of like a branch. Like, what would you call this actually, Eddie? Because I mean, what we do is already a series, but what would you call it? Like this is like a sub series, or
yeah, I guess it could be like a little sub story in our big series.
okay. Oh yeah. So okay, we got this big series, and then we're gonna have all these like little mini series, almost like a playlist. But this one we're really excited about because the name of this series is called "How to Build a Championship Software Engineering Team," and the key word is championship.
Yep.
And we're so we've noticed that in building a software engineering team and building a just sporting team, there's a lot of similarities and parallels in between there, and so what we're attempting to do is sort of uh, use building a sporting team and translate it into a software engineering team because we felt like that was really important to do, and it could be a really easy connection for a lot of people to make. And in light of that, right now, the FIFA World Cup, that really shows you how important teams are, right? Because we have two teams, Portugal and Argentina. They have the best players, the best player on each one of each of the team, right? You have Cristiano Ronaldo and Messi, and I mean these guys are like good, not just like, oh hey, they're pretty good. They're legendary, and they're out because the team is so important, right? They're really good, but their team wasn't quite up to the I guess standard as where they're playing. So
You're only as good as the weakest link on your team, and the series that we're trying to put together is going to be a multi-part mini series. I guess that would be a good name to call it, a mini
oh, there
series.
you go. Yep.
Um, on anything from how to build it from the ground up to how to support and elevate your leadership in within that team, and all sorts of tactics that you can do offensively and defensively, and we're trying to put like a cool sports spin on it because a lot of people can relate to sports, and so I think that it could translate well into your job if you just kind of thought about it in the same way.
I love how you just said offense and defense, right?
Mhm.
Because nobody would ever think about software engineering with offense and defense, and
They'd
that's
be
what we're trying.
wrong. They would be wrong.
Yeah, and that's what we're trying to do, right? We're trying to really, I guess, look at it in a way you would building a sports team, and we're going to talk about some of the topics that we're going to eventually hit on down the road. So in building a team in any other setting, it's very deliberate, right? You know, you go on to a basketball team, you go on to a football team. It's the goals and the mission is very deliberate. It's hey, we're building a team to win a championship, and
Right.
what we've seen is we haven't seen that sort of effort or time spending on building a team in software engineering settings. So one of the big things we're going to talk about is deliberately building that team and defining what winning means because winning is going to be different for every team and every different type of business. So what does it mean to win a championship in our settings? Because there's no like software engineering championship playoffs, right, or anything like that. So you have to define your own. You have to define winning in your team setting, right? Like what's the championship?
Yeah, absolutely. So like in terms of like Kiwi said, your project is going to determine what winning means to you or your company or whoever your client or whoever you're trying to work for. Um, but making deliberate strategical moves, whether that is pulling somebody on from another team because you're trying to support yourself, or clearly or more clearly define acceptance criteria for whatever sections you're working on in your project. These type of things, I think they translate well from the sports world. If you're, I'm not a huge sports guy, but most people are. I do watch some sports, but when you have an offensive coordinator, and that offensive coordinator is trying to come up with plays, that's kind of what we do. We're trying to come up with a
I love it,
plan.
man. That's awesome. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's really abstract in a software engineering team. Okay, say, hey, we're building a championship team and we're trying to win. But what does that mean? Are we beating another team or are we getting better as developers or are we launching this project with the most commits? So that sort of thing is hard to define, but you have to because winning has to be more than just coming to work and earning a paycheck. That's not winning, right? That's just
Right.
you're just you're just coming to work. But getting together and saying, hey, let's win. Let's be the best team in this company, or let's launch this project and change the world. Whatever that means, you have to get everyone excited about winning.
Thank you for saying that, because my idea popped back into my head. So
Go ahead.
you can't win alone, right?
Oh yeah.
Regardless if you're a one-man team or one-person team, you're gonna have other people that are relying on you, or that you are relying on them. So you get your project managers, you have your content creators, you have your salespeople that are trying to sell whatever project that you're working on. Those are, if you're a one-person developing team, or a one-person designer and developer and sometimes sysops person all in one, because that happens. Those people that are relying on you, those are your team. And so you can't just win by yourself. And now, even when you're on a big team, a lot of times what will happen is that some software engineers will say, okay, I'm defining winning for my career. And even though that's an important step, and it's a good thing to define goals for your career, in regards to the project that you're working on, winning needs to be defined within the scope of what's best for that project that you're working on, not necessarily like, oh, I'm doing the most commits so that I'm winning, right? Or I'm committing the most refactoring code, so that means I win. Those are important aspects of a project. But what we're trying to do is we're trying to help you guys figure out, okay, how do I make a successful team? How do I build and expand on that team? And then so that I can do the best work possible alongside everybody else. Because what you want to do is elevate everybody at the same time, including yourself, and then everybody's careers go up, including you.
Yeah. In this industry right now, everyone has the same tools, if you really think about it, right? And we're just going to talk about what we do particularly, but this is generally the same across the board because of open software and stuff like that. We all have the same tools. We all have Stack Overflow, same information. We all have the same frameworks that we use, right? How many teams are using React JS?
Yep.
How many teams are using the same languages? Across the board, no one really has advantages as far as tools. So some of the things that are going to differentiate you are the people, obviously, the skill, but also the time that you put in to deliberately build a team, right? Everybody's busy. Your competitors are busy. Everyone who's working for you is going to be busy, but the people that actually take the time to deliberately build a team is going to have that edge. And we all know in sports, it's the same thing, right? It's you think about football, everyone has access to the same tools essentially. They're all playing with a football.
Yep.
But what makes one team better than the other than the players, other than the skilled people they have on their team, but it's it's the deliberate coaching, it's the training, it's all those things that I feel like sometimes in software engineering doesn't get incorporated in with, because we don't really view it as a sporting team, so.
And you can't just have all stars. You can, that's the thing that a lot of people are really get too involved in, right? So you'll have a hiring manager, you'll have a technical recruiter that'll say,
I'm glad you brought this up.
It's important, man. Like a lot of people think that you can just hire all stars and then therefore you automatically win, or your project will be the best. I mean, I can't tell you how many all stars that I've run into that are divas, right? And that are not team players, and they're not in it for the team. They're in it for themselves, and they're trying to improve their career. And I understand that. I totally get it. This industry itself is just very competitive. It's a very competitive industry, and so everybody who wants the best jobs knows in themselves that they have to be the developer that they can be. So a lot of times that people will get into this funk where they're like, I'm just going to try to better myself, and then I'm going to move up, and then that's about it. And I think what they forget is that when you work with a lot of different people, and you will in your career, if you are a good team player, if you're good, if you make the team better, then other departments they'll covet you, and then your career will go up just on its own. But if you're hiring a team, and we'll talk about the details of this in another segment. We're gonna block out every single section that we think that is super important, and then just go do a deep dive in this mini series. Today is just kind of overall.
What topics are coming up in a second.
Yep.
We'll hit those up, but
But for all stars, you can't just to finish up my point. For all stars, you got to make sure that just because they're good does not necessarily mean that the team overall is going to be better for it. I mean,
Yeah.
especially in like sports, you've seen it like
That's what I
divas
was
and
just
all that.
gonna say.
Yep.
It's no different like in sports, right? And that's why we're making this comparison, is because that's why we say championship software engineering team, because it's no different than a sporting team.
Yep.
You know, how many times have we seen, oh, that team has a whole bunch of all-stars, great players, and they have a losing season
Yep.
because they didn't work, it didn't mesh well together. Maybe the coaching wasn't right. That, you know, whatever
Mhm.
it was, the team didn't come together and become champions essentially. It was all
Right.
MVP players, but they weren't champions together.
Yep.
Also in the software engineering teams, you know, our teams are generally small, you know, 5 to 7. So very similar to a basketball team. You know, it's very small, and unlike a football team where you have 11 on the field, right?
Right.
I hope I said that right. Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
I would like to talk about and have like a little mini section about managers who want to have a large team, because it's very very prestigious to be the leader of a large group of people, and I get that, and it's nice. It's a nice feeling. To be the most effective, I think that you do need to have these small, you know, like SWAT teams of players, of people, to execute the vision and the winning strategy. So you'll see a lot the most highly you know, productive development teams will probably have between 5 and 7 people on the team. So that's why I think Kevia and I are trying to like go with more basketball than football, because in a football team you'll have 50 people on the team. You know, you'll have 11 players out there, but you'll have 50 people on the team. So
yeah.
kind of hard to translate for small development teams, you know.
Yeah. Let's talk about the points that we're going to talk about in the future and do more deep dives on. The first one that I actually love this, and you talked about this a couple of times, is offense and defense.
Yep.
And having that sort of mindset in software engineering is kind of, I guess, could be kind of foreign for a lot of people. But you know, it's just like a sports team where you have to do like offensive plays and you have to do defensive plays. So to give you an example is, okay, so on offense we might be building features, right? So we're offensively moving forward. We're going through our sprints and we're building things. But offense could also be equipping ourselves with better tools. So learning what's out there that's going to help our team get better. Knowledge sharing, you know what I mean? Explaining to one another what techniques we're using, that sort of thing. So it's going on the offense.
Trying to advocate for things that you know that it's going to be good for the team and for the project. A lot of times you'll have marketing people or, you know, leadership teams or other other developers on different departments that will try to not really try to block you on purpose, but they will definitely be speed bumps, right? And so I think offense is trying to get over those speed bumps, and especially when you're trying to be an advocate for something specific on your project that you know is a good idea, is the right way to go. Sometimes you're going to get pushback on that, and so I think a good topic for the offense would to also incorporate that as well.
And defense. So now we have defense. This is stuff like taking time out to tackle technical debt, right? So now you're playing defense because you're maintaining, you're making sure that we don't get too far in the hole, you know.
Scope creep is a good one too.
So scope creep, yes, scope creep. So playing defense is, you know, blocking scope creep, making sure it doesn't creep into your project.
I can't wait to do that one. I got a lot to say.
I don't know if this fell into offense or defense, but learning the actual business too, you know. So learning what it is that your business, what are you doing? You know, are you like, as a developer, you're building this this piece of software, but how does it fit into the business? You know, what is your business? What are, you know, who are their customers? So that sort of thing.
Yeah.
So that could be sort of an offensive and defensive thing. But you know, so thinking about that about code in an offense and defense ways is I think a really unique thing that we're really tackling. Another sports reference.
Yep. I have a couple notes down here for some topics that I'd like to talk about as well. You know, I can talk to specifically on the leadership side of this, of being a tech lead. You know, there's some different responsibilities and roles that you're going to have to play, and alongside of being what I call a player coach. You know, being involved into the process and actually having your hands on the keyboard and doing the work alongside of trying to elevate everybody else as well. So how to lead a championship team. I definitely want to touch on that, and how to effectively do culture interviews. I think that is not talked about enough. People talk a lot about technical interviews, which are very important, but culture matters. And the last thing that you want to do is bring us somebody that's going to breed a toxic environment, and because that pushes everybody, that keeps everybody down, that will eventually kill your team. So I want to definitely
And
talk
in
about that as
sports,
well.
you see it in sports all the time. They
Yep.
bring in a toxic player. He might be good, but bring that toxic player in,
Yep.
and and it just brings the teams down. Like what happened? Why do we have a losing season? The locker room politics messed it all up. So
Mhm. Or if so, and you know what? I just thought of something. How maybe we'll get to this in this segment. Maybe we'll just do this as a off. But how to stay on your team, because I think a lot of times what will happen is you'll be so
that's a good
good,
one.
right? You'll be very, very effective in what you're doing, and you're following the steps that we outline in the series, and you're doing well in your career. And then what will happen is that people will want they will think that since you're good at this job right here, you must be good at this job over here. And that always doesn't translate. And so, how to try to mitigate issues that arise from trying to be yanked around in different departments and different teams. Because
Yeah.
I know, Kiva, you've had problems like this before. I definitely have, including the company that we're working at now, so I'd definitely like to talk about that.
We have like playing your role.
Hmm.
Sort of like every team has a role, right? You're gonna have your forwards, you're gonna have your center, you're gonna have your guards. You have to sort of know where you are in your career, and then you have to play that role. You have to it's almost and it's not like the Rock know your role type of thing, not like that. Not in a
Yeah.
I guess a negative connotation, but like more like where do you fit in? Are you the teacher? Are you the junior right now that's just learning? Are you the are you the are you the are you the star player that's really really good? And so how can you take that knowledge and disperse it amongst your teams? Are you the defensive player? Are you the one that's sort of like OCD and likes to go through the code and make sure everything's straight?
And
So
documented.
and document it, yeah. And then so if you know what your role is, play that role, and for everybody else on the team, let that person play that role. If you know that that person has OCD and he likes to go in and document, she's like, hey, you should do that. Go ahead and do that, and trust that person into doing that. So here there's some trust also, letting each person play that role and trusting that person to play that role.
And you may not always want to be in the role that you're in, and that's going to happen from time to time. But knowing what your role is, and then coming up with a strategy to either just improve at that role, or improve and then come up with a plan to move into a different role, or the one that you're more interested in. I think that's super important too, because you're not going to be effective at your job, and you're not going to be able to get out of that role if you're not good at it. Because once you're good at that role, and then you can prove yourself to be effective, you have more clout to go to your team leader, to your engineering manager or whatever, to say, hey, I'm more interested in going to this route.
Yeah.
Maybe you're a back end guy and you're like, oh, I want to be a front end person, or maybe you want to be a full stack, and then you're working towards that. So understanding your current role and your current position, being most effective at that, and it allows you to be able to move into something that you're more passionate about, or just the route that you want to go into to begin with.
Yeah. And in any team setting, though, like people naturally fall where they sort of have a natural they naturally fall where they sort of have a tendency to fall into, right?
Hmm.
So you're gonna have that developer that's more like concerned about performance and tooling, and you're gonna have the developer that's really concerned about like conventions and that sort of thing.
Yep.
And so and then like everybody's gonna kind of naturally fall in those roles. And so recognize that role and foster it. Let them get better at it. Let them become that advocate, and let them like work in that role. And I'm not saying pigeonhole them, because eventually you want to move around, but kind of let them develop that role and trust that developer to stay in that role, and whatever they do, whatever decisions they make, trust that developer, because once we can focus on these different roles, um, that the project can get that much more better. Because one person is not going to be able to do everything. It's hard. We're all busy. Everyone's we're knocking out features. So if you have these different developers that are more concerned about different types and different areas of the project, let them, and trust them.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, know your role and playing that role and letting your teammates play that role and trusting them. So we already touched on these last little points, but define what winning means and what that, I guess, that ultimate goal, that championship is, and that'll probably be the first deep dive we get into, because that's kind of important. That kind of sets the trend for everything, because you got to define what winning is and what's the championship. But then you go, okay, how we get there? Play offense and defense. This one, so
right,
falls in there. So
you can't start a project unless you know what the end goal is going to be. And so I'm really kind of excited about starting that particular video up, which will come out next Sunday. And just make sure you guys watch all of our series. We've been doing this kind of broad, how to be a good developer, how to break into the industry before, and so just make sure you check out our videos to keep up on that. If this is the very first time you're watching the video, I think you're in for a treat. Even if you're not building a software development team, being having this knowledge, having this information, and just being on one is going to allow you to kind of be a more well-rounded team player, a better developer. It's going to make your job easier, and honestly, it's going to allow you to move into that leadership role if you want to more quickly, because knowledge is power, right?
I mean, I would imagine just this sort of dynamics that we're talking about would be all across the board. Anytime humans get together to work together, together and build something.
You could talk. Right? You can take all the stuff that we're talking about now and apply it to just a household, right? So if you're trying to build up a household, it's the same thing. You have your team, and you got to build up that team. You're gonna have divas in that household, and you're gonna have all stars, and you're gonna have
dogs. Is that the dogs?
Is it the dogs? It's mostly the kids. Mostly the kids. Yeah. Yeah, I think it's going to be a fun series, and I just can't wait to do it.
All right, with that said, we're out. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next Sunday.
You guys.
See ya.